Hello and welcome to another in our series of fireside chats today, a slightly simpler setting in the absence of our usual greenery, but with the presence of the Episcopal bath duck, courtesy of the Episcopal chaplain, Reverend Dave Perryman, our preacher this morning for the pre-recorded Eucharist for the 6th Sunday after Pentecost. Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for your ministry to us today and in church, and for spending a little bit of extra time having a chat today. We really appreciate it, especially because you are the proud dad of a new baby girl, and so we expect that you're a little bit sleep deprived if young Luciana is keeping you and Emma and others awake at night. So
yes.
So you're doing very well for a man who's underslept and overworked. So.
Yeah. Caffeine is a very good.
You've got your version and I've got mine,
yes.
So that's all is well.
Yes.
All is well. Dave, tell us a little bit about your role, because you juggle a couple of things. You're the priest in charge of the parish of Avon, which is a multi-centred parish not far from here, and that's convenient because for several days a week you're actually working in here at the registry office as part of the registry team, but with a particular portfolio, I guess, as my chaplain. So, what does all that mean and feel like for you?
Well, in 3.5 years, I still don't actually fully know. It was a conversation with Jan McIntyre on Warrigal, and I said, I've been spending a couple of days as Bishop's chaplain, and she said, isn't that the person that just holds the bishop's stick? So it's been a bit of Googling in some sense, trying to look around, and it's hard. It's supporting the ministry and mission of the bishop. However that takes form, because it can take many different forms. It can be helping to write letters, can be helping to organise. Sometimes it's being a bit like radar from MASH, and you're always trying to cast your eye to the horizon to see what's coming next, and listening for those potential issues or problems or the events that are going to quickly be upon us. Sometimes it's just watching out for the bishop, and if you've got a bishop that works very hard and has a very strong work ethic, and sometimes it can even mean reminding them to eat regular square meals.
Yeah, you do it well. You've often said there's a little clause in your position description, a little asterisk down the bottom of the page, other duties as required.
So, absolutely, yeah.
And as you say, it can be a very diverse range of things. But and I guess it probably is a role that exposes you to the life of the wider church a little bit beyond the diocese, just in terms of the things that I have to engage with, more broadly. What's that like? Is that something you enjoy?
Yeah, it is. It's really it's certainly something I find really refreshing, of having a foot in local ministry and then also in the wider church, and just seeing how things evolve and just beginning to understand how it all works.
Yeah.
Seeing some of the resources that come out, and what others are thinking. It's an honour, if anything, to be able to see how all that unfolds.
Yeah, and it's good to remember that we are part of something bigger.
Yeah, most definitely.
Which is one of the great joys of our polity.
Mm.
So, speaking of square meals, Dave, and reminding the bishop to eat square meals, KFC. Now, two strands here. I want to talk a little bit about your journey into ministry, having, as you say, worked for over a decade in quite senior roles, managing outlets for KFC. You grew up here in the diocese, and I think that the stirrings to vocation, to ordained ministry, came quite early for you, but it wasn't a straight line, was it? Tell us a little bit about how you journeyed from those 11 mysterious herbs and spices into the mysteries of holy orders.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the early stirrings were, as early as I can remember, when I was 5, going across to my grandmother's and dressing up in her dressing gown and laying out her kitchen table for Eucharist, for all the teddy bears. It started there, and I mean, obviously having a mother as a priest as well that paved the way. See, my theory is that actually mum saw that and thought, actually that's a really good idea. I'll follow my son.
She stole it.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I think she's actually paved the way and been an inspiration for me to as she's journeying through. But yeah, certainly from a young age, and it very much it was kind of like a bit like waves. It came in and then went out of focus as I grew up. When I was 14 and doing work, spent my work experience in the parish for 2 weeks, and really feeling that sense again of there is something here, and real thankfulness actually to our priest at the time, Bruce Charles, for his support of that, for not just pushing that aside of this 14-year-old that's got this interest and this sense. So in that time, I started work at KFC. Kind of fell into it more than anything else. Proceeded through whilst I was working, and then basically had my plan set out. I was always wanted to be a airline pilot, and then I was going to retire from that when I was 40 and become a police officer, and then at 65 I'd be ordained and be a priest.
Is that Augustinian thing, Lord, make me good but not yet?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Robbie Williams actually has the same song.
There you go.
Yeah, no, it's but very much that sense of all these different things that I wanted to do, and found out I had colour confusion, so that kind of put the flying to the side. So I applied for forensic science at Swinburne University, and I was going to go ahead and do that, and my supervisor at the time said, look, we're looking for an assistant manager. I said, I'll give it a shot, why not? So I stepped into that role and deferred university for a year, and then just didn't go back. Really enjoyed the people, like the sort of family that works, and in the long run is possibly some of the best training I could have ever had for ministry. I mean, for things like conflict management and dealing with different leadership styles, for managing a $2.4 million business, obviously a different model, but the underlying skills that came out of that were incredibly useful.
Because as you said in your sermon, it's relational.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, there's and I think that's probably one part that I always struggled with KFC was of course you have to be focused on profit, but I was much more on the relational side of things and partially trying to look out for my employees as much as anything else, which sometimes did clash with that. So yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it was in that time that when we used to hold cow camps here in the diocese, and I attended one of those camps, and that's when the call really started to come to the surface once again. And I remember driving home with Mum and said, I think I need to go and speak to the bishop about this. And so I put it aside, and then 2 weeks later I had a dream that I was actually speaking with the bishop. So took it as a bit of a sign that maybe I should go and have a conversation. And then had that conversation, began that journey, and the vocational panel agreed. I was 19, 20 at the time.
Wow, yeah.
Said, yes, support the calling, but he has a bit more seasoning, which ended up being very true, and trying to balance in that sense of trying to balance study, work, and placement was an interesting juggle. Being young, I was certainly on placement at Curran Borough. There was elements of immaturity within myself. Still had a lot to learn and to grow into the seriousness of that. Speaking of generosity, I'm very gracious to my supervisor, Jenny Wicking, for her patience of dealing with me while I was still
pretty green.
Pretty green, and sometimes pretty difficult, but very, very appreciative of that support. So it's always had this journey of all these different things, different things flowing together, and continuing on through that, and eventually got to 2015, had our first child to throw into the mix, and actually was one of the best things for my own journey of actually helping to snap me into that different mindset and helped me to really knuckle down and to find my place. And
So tell us a bit about that, Dave, because you've now got 4 children under 5, three boys and a lady girl. 4 and 6, I should say, 4 and 6, and you know that's pretty full dance card in anyone's language, let alone combining that with you know full-time ministry across 2 different roles. How do you used the word balance before? How do you balance that and still be a husband and a dad and a priest and a chaplain and
the juggle is exactly right. I think in many ways trying to keep all the balls in the air. Sometimes things have to give, and it's very much about priority. Of when the kids aren't well, okay, no, his family needs to come first. Work later into the evening or this and the other. It keeps you very grounded. I think in terms of just being human in one sense, but when you're standing at the pulpit on a Sunday morning with 3 hours sleep and you're gripping the pulpit and you're almost reading your sermon because you can't think straight. My sermon last week was a prime example of I think I got lost about 4 or 5 times. So there is that human side to it, and
but we minister out of that, don't we?
Most definitely.
It's important to have that kind of authenticity and that same human vulnerability that everyone has, that people can connect with and relate to, and we all kind of express it in different ways, but not to despise that or try and hide it or
exactly. Exactly right. And to just own that, and in some cases to apologise. Sorry if that didn't make any sense to you, but exactly right. But being so very important to be able to be human, to be in some cases vulnerable, and to expresses the heart of Jesus' ministry himself. So that relational, bringing it back down to. So.
Yeah, I only have 2, and that does my head in. So, how you managed before, it's a great credit to you, and Emma. Great joy to us all.
Oh, which the foundation upon any of this as well is Emma.
Yeah.
Very much holding up the end, and her patience and generosity with me.
And her own faith and
her
own sense of ministry.
Her own sense of ministry and support. Yeah. And she talks about that as well, about her own sense of call and to build up the church, and she's got a real heart for kids and for youth, for family, the church, and what better place than to start at home.
Indeed. Our ministry does start wherever we are in our immediate context, including our domestic environment. That's so true. Back to those 11 herbs and spices, and it's that classic thing of from little things big things grow, isn't it? Little tiny bits of seasoning that create that magical flavour. Conversely, in a darker sense, a little virus spore, that can create the kind of havoc we're going through at the moment. Of course, in a more positive light, and from another parable, the little mustard seed that grows into the plant of the kingdom. There's something in that, and what you shared with us this morning about the mystery of divine generosity, and the way God uses those tiny things, those mustard seeds of faith, and the extravagance of God in the way, as it were, God will throw good seed after bad soil. So I love the way that you teased out this kind of contrast between our usual way of operating in economies of exchange, like that kind of transactional model that we kind of fall into so often in our culture, whereas the kingdom operates on an economy of grace, where nothing is earned. It's not a transaction, it's not an exchange. All is a gift. At one level, that's so simple. The gospel is so simple, but at another level, it's so hard to really grasp. I mean, we can understand it here, but to really own it here, that all we can do is receive that gift. It's so profound and such a challenge, I think, for us spiritually. Quite countercultural. What do you think we can learn from that as a church. How do we model that extravagance, that divine generosity, that almost reckless risk-taking with love? Are we in danger sometimes of putting too many conditions around God's love? How can we kind of free ourselves from some of the shackles of that, do you think?
Well, it's exactly right. I think it's, the moment we try and put walls down, we're always going to find God on the other side of who God can love and call. That challenge, I think, is of that reckless generosity, and I was speaking to you before about Elizabeth Johnson and her own. That's the temptation to be safe into what will work, and that calculated risk rather than in many ways, being willing to just abandon and to step out fully into that. I've got 3.5 years in ministry, so I by no means have the calculated formula, but being willing to step out regardless of what we do in church and regardless of what that ministry looks like, but being willing to actually step out is half the battle, I think, in some ways, of being willing to step out and fail, exactly right, and to accept that and to learn from that, knowing full well that there is a call somewhere that is there. It's just might take a few attempts to find, and being willing to fail. That's probably it. To cast into all different soils. Being willing to.
It's that learning thing, isn't it? About there being only two kind of forces at work, in the universe: love and fear. And it's easy for us to operate out of fear, including the fear of failure, the fear that there might not be enough seed, enough good soil, enough resources, enough love.
Yes.
And yet that call to operate out of love, which is risky because God's love in creation is risky, to set creation free for things to go wrong, like COVID-19.
Yes.
God's love in redemption is risky, the risk of Calvary that you referred to today. So I think it's great to see that parable as a call to step out and risk for love. Yeah. So thank you for the way that you opened that up for us. And you said you've only got 3.5 years in ministry. What's that biblical text? Do not let them despise your youth. There are great benefits that come with later vocations, I think, to ordained ministry in terms of people's life experience and their sense of themselves. But there are also great benefits in younger vocations. And like you, I had an early vocation, and I look back and I was so green and so unformed in many ways. It's a wonder they let me out to do anything, and the dependence that we have on good mentoring, as you mentioned with Bruce and others, Jenny. How important that is, that there are people around us who can just help us to grow in the role.
Yes. Exactly right.
But given that you do kind of represent, what in some ways, we can often think as a kind of missing generation or demographic in the churches as a younger person. Sometimes I think we bewail the lack of young people in the worshipping community. Are we overly anxious about that? Do we need to trust more that the seed sown will bear fruit in due season? Or what's your sense of perhaps why your own generation is underrepresented in the church?
It's a big question. It's a big question. I think they all each tie together. In part, I think we've spoken about new ways of doing church, and I've spoken, and in many ways it's that same willingness to try and step out and to do some of these things, a bit differently and accommodate place for some of our younger folk. Relevancy is always a big part of it.
So is that about attention to context, to cultural context, rather than kind of, or is it about rethinking, where the gospel connects with people?
Yeah, I think it's most definitely exactly rethinking where that's going to connect in a way that's going to connect with them, however that looks.
So it's both style and substance.
I think there's a number of conversations to be had on that front. I was looking at the various characteristics of different generations and the generalisation therein. So looking at my own generation of seeing word and deed go together, and sometimes it's no secret that the church's word and the church's deeds have not lined up. So there is a bit of unsurety there.
Loss of credibility.
Loss of credibility, incredibly so.
So post-Royal Commission.
Exactly right. But it also comes back down to that transactional, relational of my current generation of if you're building a relationship with someone to try and lasso them in, then it's all the more reason actually to put someone aside that's got an ulterior motives, whereas someone that's actually building relationship just to build relationship has a much more authentic approach, which is one characteristic. These aren't all the end conclusions, mind you. These are just
of course, but that's a really important point. I think about not being instrumental in wanting to attract people. That we're not wanting to attract them for the sake of what they can give back to our structures or our system.
Exactly.
But for their own sake and for the sake of what we're wanting to offer.
Most definitely, and presence as much as anything else as well. I mean, there's many untapped places in society. I mean, I am very fortunate to have a parish that supports me playing cricket during the summer, which is probably not good for our cricket team because that's generosity on my captain's behalf for letting me play. But in terms of just that presence with no other ulterior motive, just to be there, to be present, and in time those conversations do come about. Remembering back when I was in Morthaggy and standing out on the cricket deck, 9 o'clock at night, just chatting with one of the folks, and he turned around and said, "Look, Rev, I just don't get this." and the conversations that just that begin to take place when we're present, when we're real, when they see that we're human, we get just as angry when we go out, or any of those things.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic example of that, just that kind of point of connection and kind of being there. Which is such a huge part of our ministry, isn't it? Ministry. And
what's the other part I was going to say is also surrender. Everybody has that place in the church, but also allowing them, allowing the youth, the younger, to have that space and to bring with it their own experiences and their own understanding of what church can be and mean for them, which is sometimes a difficult conversation to have with anyone,
of course,
congregation,
because we get attached to things as they are. And I guess one of the things that COVID's teaching us is to perhaps be less attached to things as they are or as they've been. Yeah. So would you say, Dave, that you're hopeful? I mean, given COVID and bushfires and the cultural kind of displacement of the church and the generational challenges we have, all those things that we could adduce. Despite all that, do you feel hopeful about the future of your ministry and the church?
Most definitely. Because yes, the conversations that go forward from here, provided that we keep on having this conversation, rather than just it'd be so easy. Yet again, this is part of our fear. Just put our hands up and we'll just stay with what is. So we've got the courage to be willing to have these conversations, in some cases to be willing to change. there is definitely hope, regardless of what form it takes. And who knows what church is going to look like on the other side in 20 years.
And by the way, I don't know either, so we'll have to work it out together. Yeah. Well, Dave, thank you for what you shared so candidly with us in this conversation. Thank you for the lovely way you broke open the word for us today. Thank you also on a personal note for your ministry to me and through that your ministry to the wider diocese and indeed the wider church. So we really appreciate it. And we hold you in our prayers, you and Emma, as you rejoice in your ever-growing family and as you juggle all the different roles that fall to you. So bless you in all of that, and thanks again for your time today.
Well, thank you, Bishop. Let me say thank you, because one of the things I was reading for a chaplain says that the bishop's chaplain's role is to help the bishop play to their strengths by covering their weaknesses. So thank you.
Which I mean,
no, that's quite the opposite. So thank you.
Pleasure. Cheers.